It's triggered by upbringing, I guess, for most people. Well, for me, it is. Basically, said the way I came to church was because living in Peterborough at the time we did in the 60s, it was very unusual to see a black face on the street. So our family was one of the first. And, you know, my parents were very cautious about the fact that we were one of the first. So they wanted to make sure that we didn't rock the boat, in essence. We were seen but not heard, in essence. And when we went to school, we did our thing at school. And we came home, and then generally our time would be spent as family away from anything that my parents would see as being a risk for any sort of exposure to any sort of racism. So we spend time with family in London, or we go to the seaside, but we do it together as family. So that's how it was. But I didn't really experience any real racism, I guess, because where we were was there was a nice community type environment. So we were, as I say, one of the few black faces, but we'd be looked after by the neighbours. You know, there's interaction that was good. So, you know, it's very different. And being as my mom and dad were from a Christian background, there'd always be, you know, blessed are the peacemakers. You know, don't try and find a way of stimulating aggravation or response that's going to be unhelpful. Try and find a way of making bridges. So that was my upbringing. So that is my lens, I guess. I'm looking at some of these things. So the history that I'm hearing is probably not my full experience, but I'm making myself more aware of it, so I've got a better perspective. So that's just my first penny's worth on it.
Okay, my experience then slightly different. Also with my mum and dad, but I came to the UK in 1962, so I'm a Windrush child. Sorry about the hands. I am a Windrush child. Came to join my parents here. So it was a kind of a strange situation for me, coming and finding a very restricted living. And when I say restricted, I lived in the country, so I spent a lot of time outside. And I come here and we have fenced walls, a bit locked in that way. Again, myself, my parents were almost like yours, Owen, in a way, Christian background. They weren't going to church at the time because when they first arrived, they weren't welcome at churches, so they weren't going to church themselves at that time. And when they did start going to church, it was a house church, sort of Pentecostal church, and that's how their Christian life kind of developed. For myself, I came around the same time as a lot of other young people. So when I went to school, I was with a lot of those children. I didn't necessarily know them beforehand, but we had a kind of a strength because we had this common situation. We were foreigners, coming from different islands, but that was a kind of strength and comfort for us. But we did have issues that at one point, I was, I think, 12 and I was a prefect, and this young lady called me a gollywog, and that kind of upset me a bit, and I was very unprefectly and I hit her. So I lost my prefect's badge, but also I was told I had a chip on my shoulder, and that was how they dealt with it. That was it. And so I felt, well, actually I'm honored to lose my badge in actual fact, because she made me feel a way, but it was my fault. And that was how that was dealt with. So that's kind of the only kind of face-to-face direct racism that I can say that I experienced. But there are the other pieces which are not so overt. And sometimes it's people's ignorance. Just to give you an example, I worked at a credit firm here in Northampton many, many years ago. And there was a gentleman, he used to go door to door and collect all the loans and things. And I'd speak to him every week. And then one week he was going to come into the office. And I said to the girls, all the other girls were white, and I said to them, he will come to me last. And they said, why would you say that? I said, just watch it. And he came to the office and he walked to everybody and shook their hand. Hello, Claudette. Hello, Claudette. And he did come to me last. And then his face was, oh, I do have a black stepdaughter. I didn't say anything, but I just thought, the obvious ignorance, and he felt more embarrassed than I did. And the girls were saying, well, how did you know that? I said, you know, we have experience. And you see that my voice and my name didn't give too much away. And so his shock, because he'd spoken to this person all this time and it couldn't possibly be me. And there are lots of other examples like that. So it's not someone coming up and saying anything to you or, you know, calling you a racist name or anything, but it's just in the behavior. And sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's deliberate, but you just, yeah, just kind of carry on. And there are lots of incidents like that, not just for me, but people I know. Had the car stopped very early on. Whose car is this? Very polite, not, but whose car is this? What you're doing here? And I was on the way from church, having just christened my son. And that they stopped us halfway. And that was an experience again. And these things you kind of, it does hurt you at the time, but you think, okay, makes you stronger. But it depends who you have around you to help that strength. If you keep getting that happening to you, and there's nobody to kind of show you a different perspective or a different side or encourage you, one can see how people go down a particular road of negativity. So there's that. Have I got anything else? Going into the supermarkets and being followed or being watched, and you can see that people are watching you because they think you are going to steal. I know they watch lots of people, but there is a kind of event as I walk in, obviously I'm of the thieving kind. So you have that as well to put up with, lots of other issues, but those things kind of come to, and they do kind of get on your nerves.
But I don't know, it's not been, well, race hasn't been a very prominent thing in my life, but there's obviously been like little experiences. Like I've been followed around shops before, and there's been like little, like when you're in like primary school and they make like little comments and stuff, they're like, oh, you're brown. I'm like, yes. And it's just, I don't know, little things happen and then you're like, oh, well, that's not supposed to be something that makes me different, but it is. But yeah. I think before like the whole Black Lives Matter movement was so prominent, it was kind of just like something that was in the back of my head, but now it's been brought forward and it's something that I feel like I want to actively be a part of, because like I'm a person of color. So it just seems like it should be something that I am like passionate about.
Great. And Addy, what about you?
It's quite interesting. After I got the invitation, I've just been thinking through, I mean, with Owen and Claudette as invitees, and it just occurred to me because if you think through it, as Claudette has rightly pointed out, she came here in the 60s to meet her parents, almost like the Windrush generation. Owen's parents were here, and he was born here. My parents studied here from Nigeria. I was born here, but then I actually grew up in Nigeria. So as Owen has said, it's almost has to do with your experiences. And yes, I understand where a lot of people are coming from. A lot of the Black Lives Matter. It's important. But even though I'm Black, my experiences are totally different from others. And therefore, it's as much as I can understand, as much as possible or as best as I can, as to people having issues with police and things like that. Sometimes thinking back, I mean, I've lived here now since 1990 on a consistent basis, but by the time I came here, I was actually an adult. So I could actually, I had sort of gone through basic education. I came here to start a company for the Nigerian company I worked for. Yes, there was racism in terms of, I think the stereotype is, yeah, you're a Black person, you wouldn't have had any form of any sensible education to start with. Your English will be terrible, you can't even write English and stuff like that. And those are the things that I experienced, even though I was actually running a business. one of the examples is I actually had, before I came in, a secretary had been actually interviewed by the lawyers, and she was working for the company. And I came in and we had to do, then, pieces were not regular and all that. So she was still typical secretary, pick the calls, do the letters. And I found out that I was drafting letters and the tone of my letters were actually being changed because this lady believed that my English wasn't good enough. And it got to a point where, I'll sort of, after she'd left in the evenings, I'll retype my letters and send them out. And I had to call her I think it was a Friday, and I said, look, I do this letter, it's a business letter, it's not a personal letter yet. There's a particular tone that you want to go with this, and this is how I'd rather it's written. And she turns around and says, well, I'm English. That's what she said. And I actually, initially I was shocked. And then I had to say to her that, look, okay, you're English, but the way it works is where I come from, I had to go back there to say where I come from. We actually, even though English is the national sort of business language and school language in Nigeria, I actually had to learn English. And therefore, my parents actually insisted that I learned English properly. And that was where the conversation ended. And I said, I'd rather, if you don't understand what I've written, speak to me about it. And, and I left work that evening. I left quite late because then we're in London. And I was on the show and I was thinking that, why should it be that I have these conversations with anybody? I was a bit, a bit disappointed that in 1990 we'll have this kind of conversations, in England, considering that, I said my parents lived there for 14 years. They studied here, they lived Southampton, London, and various places. And I remember that my parents, when they came back to Nigeria, because I had been sent back to live with my grandparents because I was unwell when I was born. I had asthma and it was very cold. But by the time my parents came back, they brought back a lot of English things because, more recently, just before my dad died, I was actually speaking to him about it, and he said they decided that there were some things that were good that they picked up when they lived here, and they wanted to live by that. So they actually amalgamated the experiences here with the traditional Nigerian upbringing, and that's how we were sort of brought up. Mm-hmm. And then coming here to live on a permanent basis, as Claudia has said, yes, in London, you're Black, you're followed around sometimes, and we lived, I lived in Streatham, and then we moved to North London, went Tottenham, Edmonton, and then Enfield. And around there, yes, it was almost as if, yes, because of the color of your skin, you are always on your guard, because particularly in Tottenham, it was almost as if the police were always against the black colored people, and therefore, yes, I've been stopped a few times. Luckily, nothing came out of it. And even moving to Northampton, we've had one of the experiences, particularly, I think that was about 2 weeks after we moved into Brixworth. My car was actually tailed by a police car from Boughton, and I saw the car as I was coming across. They were on the right about it, and they actually turned around and followed me, and actually drove slowly behind me up to my door. And I drove in here, and I came out of the car. The police actually slowed down and looked at me, and then just drove away. And the second time, pardon?
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say they did the same thing to Carl about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Sorry. And there was another day, Yomi and I were coming back from London. We had just gone for, I think, a function or something. very well dressed and all that. And we were stopped by Seoul Central. And it was along the lines that, we stopped you because you fit some descriptions and you're coming from a particular direction. And I personally felt affronted because there were two white policemen and they were so nonchalant in the way they were speaking. They were not guarded at all. And it was almost as if, we've got this report and it must be. And I said, look, we're coming from this particular direction. It's different from what you're talking about. I know, well, you fit the description. And the next thing one of them did was actually going around our car, actually checking the tires. And I thought, I really felt small because my wife was there. I was powerless to do anything at that point in time. And these guys were actually speaking to us as if we were, pardon the word, we're juveniles, as if I'd done something wrong. Eventually they called through and I think they checked everything and it was okay. And they just left. No apologies, nothing. Like I said, that day really, really felt small, and I think that was the second and sort of the most radical one that I personally have experienced.
What are your reflections on kind of the last few weeks since the death of George Floyd?
It's definitely heightened an awareness. And there's a whole range of emotions, really, because to see someone be killed on the street in broad daylight, no matter who it is wrong. Yeah. So, you can't ignore that. And it has triggered a whole wave of emotion across the world, which is great. And I think, the momentum of this is a good opportunity to see something bigger happen, a permanent change as well. Now, it's interesting that, maybe they'll do some legislative changes, but it's not, I don't think that's the crux of it. I was listening to something today which really helped to get a perspective on it, which is, it's not about the legislation because people will follow the law, but they won't change their heart necessarily. So it's about a heart change. We've got to find a way of actually getting people to understand how that works. It's not about motion or doing the right thing. It's about feeling the right thing, getting empathy and getting connected. And one of the things I've always, believed, which is why I'm always making the connection or trying to build those bridges or finding the way to actually interact with people, because, as I said, I've not really experienced much opposition from my colour from people, probably because I'm a jovial type of character and I'm easily approachable, I guess. I've seen a couple of incidents, just to step back a little, where in work, a professional place, like Claudette says, the name doesn't give anything away. But I go to an official person, I meet them, and they turn around, look at me, and they say, "You don't look like an Owen." So my colleague, who is white, is just totally embarrassed, and we try and move things along because this is not and this is a proper professional person that's got doctor on the back of their name and stuff, and you think they'd know better. And I've only ever had one other experience where I was blatantly approached by someone who was malicious in their intent. We actually managed to walk away from it, but advised by Adam to go and talk to the police. And I thought, well, they're not going to do anything about it. But the action was they were very proactive, and this person went to prison for 6 months. So that's the long and the short of it. So there was a good side to the police. And hearing what Addy said is a surprise, because I've never been through that process myself, never experienced that. So it goes on. And so these last couple of weeks that you've seen the emotion of the nation, the emotion of the world, has been a real eye-opener, because you're getting lots of stories of people with various experiences going on, and people having different experiences, like I've had one and you guys have had one, which are very different. So our exposure to this thing is not as deep in some cases, or much deeper in other cases. So, for me, I'm optimistic that this is going to make a bigger change for the good going forward. But one of the things that is a big issue for me has been the fact that the reason I came to church in the first place, or the reason we came to church in the first place, as is in my testimony, was because we came in as a black family into a mainly white church, and we were accepted, and that's why we started going to church here in the UK. And I found exactly the same when I came to Broadmead. I was accepted for my colour and for the person. There was no apparent visible difference between us. We were just loved because we were Christians together. And I think that that was a thing that moved me into a place of connection. And it was a case of, there was a stepping across the boundaries of the unknown to try and understand who the other person was, to make that connection. And, you know, that's my philosophy. I always try and find a way of connecting with someone who I don't know, and you give them the chance, and if there's a break in that chance, then you try and correct it or whatever you need to do. But I think it's a two-way street, and this movement here, there's a lot of talk about there's got to be apologies from the white people for what's gone on in the history of 400 years, etc., or the American history and stuff, and all the other things that have gone on. And history can learn from, and it's great to learn from history because we've seen the mistakes that have been made. But moving forward, we make a new history. We do this together. So it's not about apportioning blame. So understanding the background we've come from and the pain that's bringing our side, I guess, from the black people who've had a lot of hatred or holding on to some stuff, and for the people that are being the oppressors or whatever they want to be or what they're classed as, and working out how we move forward in this by understanding each other. So for me, I think there's a great opportunity, not just because the generation that have been carrying this for, I don't know how long, the older generation, their experience has been historic and they've carried it through. But the new generation, Kara's generation, have got a very different experience where they're actually much more cosmopolitan in their mix with people. And they don't necessarily see the same racist level of attack that we would have experienced back in the day, because there was such a very direct or indirect method of connection that way. So these guys are seeing things very differently. So this move at this time, I believe, is going to be a good thing, because the people that are going to carry it forward are the ones that have got no axe to grind. They want to see the right thing happen for the equal rights for everyone. So I think that's great. I don't know.
I was just gonna say, there's like increasing globalization that my generation have experienced. So like we have social media, so we can see like everything. Like I wouldn't have seen anything about George Floyd if it wasn't for social media. And I think that social media has played a big part in it, because like we are so in touch with everything that's going on in the world. So we have more opportunity. We have more opportunity to be like involved in it, or like to see it and be outraged by it. Like I was outraged by the video of George Floyd, and that is what sparked my participation in the movement. So I think with our generation being so in touch with like everything in the world, it's very much allowed everyone to be a part of it.
Just before I go to Addy and Claudette, just a few sort of reflections. I mean, I really agree with what you're saying about, you know, laws might change, but it's a heart thing. And I was, as you were saying, I was thinking there are probably those who are never going to change their views.
Right.
And probably those who already have a good, healthy, you know, non-discriminating attitude. But I guess what might change is those people who wouldn't be maybe blatant about it, but maybe just don't realise that some of their some of their attitudes or some of the things they say are subtly racist, or do you know what I mean, or just you know, even comments like, you know, oh, I wish I could wear my hair like you wear your hair, or those kind of, you know, or even kind of when when I see you, I mean, I don't see your colour, and those kind of things that, you know, are subtly, you know, and maybe actually it's that group in the middle where actually this movement can really make a difference in terms of heart change kind of stuff. So I value your thoughts on that. I think two other things. You're talking about history. Do you, and this is to anyone really, do you understand why people want these statues removed? Do you understand, you know, that kind of thing? And then my third kind of reflection was, I'm trying to think what the third thing was. Oh, I'll come back to it.
It's catching, Adam. It's catching. It's the age. It's the age. I just remembered, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
What do you think about that? I've just remembered what my point was that I lost my train on. I was very accepted by the church when I started in Peterborough and when I came here. But there is a sense that the noble action of the church is almost as supportive of the movement of racism than no voice at all. So you have to have a voice basically as a church. And as Christians, we are taught that we should be, as Jesus did, righting the wrongs, doing the right thing, standing up and being advocates for the people that can't speak. And I think, you know, people can nominally class themselves as Christian, but they don't act upon that. And, you know, you've seen it in history and seen it recently where there's been very much, I think I saw an article in Christianity magazine that says, you know, why is it that there's black and white churches? You know, they're not the church. They are separated identically by their colour. And that's not helpful because it's one Christ. It's one church. Where do we go with that? And it's about breaking down that stereotype because, you know, I think the comment was, you know, as a brother or sister, you're supposed to love your brothers and sisters as you do. And to do that means that you empathise with their difficulties and with their joys. And if someone is suffering for, you know, walking down the street, as Adi was saying, or Claudette was saying, and they're stopped in their car, does that cause outrage for us? Or do we just think, oh, that's the norm? And so it's about working out how much of a real love do we have for our brothers and sisters outside of the colour spectrum, but for the reality that we are all Christians and we walk in the same walk. We all have the same challenges. We all bleed the same blood. How do we move into that space where we actually are much more realistic about our love for each other?
Yeah. I've remembered my third point now. Okay. This is purely my reflection, and I'm quite willing to accept that it's wrong or a perspective. But why do you think, in my view, and I think it may be circumstances have added this, but in my view, the way that people have responded to this death is not the same as when, you know, Rodney King was, you know, and all that happened, and when Stephen Lawrence was killed, and other things in the past. And so I guess I'm just trying to kind of, what do you have a reflection on? I mean, is that right? Is that a right perspective? And I guess the second thing is what are the reasons for that, do you think?
I think certainly, yeah, the uproar for Rodney King was slightly different, but there's been a whole spate of these police to individuals situations. You know, today, because you asked about this, I was having a look back to Malcolm X. I was very young at the time, and people like that talking about this same situation back in 1962. And nothing has changed for those people, essentially. But I think what really did it this time, because we know they've been killing people, it's the way that it happened, that this gentleman, the police officer, and two others, which we couldn't see initially, but how he felt so comfortable in taking that life. He didn't care that he was on stage. He was just cold and kept going. And even after the ambulance arrived, he still did not remove his knee. And I think for me, that was, his hatred is so much for this person of color that might as well be me. And that was my feeling in that moment. That could be me, that could be my brother, it could be whoever. I think that was the thing, that he was just so comfortable. We all know that it's been happening. I did a sample of about 24 people over the last 10 years. There's been loads more, but similar police situation, average age, and I included George Floyd. I included him, and the average age was 25. Of these 24 people that have been killed in the last 10 years, there are loads more. But when you read through what actually happened, they didn't deserve that. A lot of them were unarmed. I mean, even George, he was on the floor, on his stomach. He was handcuffed. He couldn't go anywhere. So actually, they had him in their control at that point. The rest of what went on, that's the bit that really hurts. That really, really hurts, and that's how I felt. Really hurt and angry. But it was the chilling bit that he was just so comfortable doing it in public. And I thought, had that been a dog, or had that been a white person, there would have been greater uproar. I'm sure President Trump would have behaved differently. I would like to think he would, but that was my thinking at the time. Had this been a dog and they had a knee on a dog like that, yeah, there would have been a greater uproar. That was
yeah. I heard it today described as a public lynching, which I think is a very, it really puts it. And I was drawn back to that, Claudette, when you were saying that actually it's just he's willing. They've all got body cameras on. He knows it's being. Addy.
I think in a lot of ways, I've been thinking a lot about this, partly because my brother lives in Dallas, and he lives in outside the major city, and it's really a white redneck area. I mean, putting it very politely. And I thought that it could have been him. It could have been, well, my nephew is about 11. Well, could be him in a few years or something like that. And that really hurt, because just thinking, as Claudette said, each time I watch that video, it's almost as if with this guy's hands in his pocket and looking, it was almost as if looking right into a camera, and it's like, yeah, I can do this. I've got the power to do this. And somebody said to me, it's just, unfortunately, this is just one of so many, as Claudia has also said. But then sort of thinking through America or the world as a whole, it's a power-driven environment, not just in America, even here. And everybody in whatever sphere they exist in, people are always trying to show their power, which this came to me one of these mornings that, why would these guys do this? If it wasn't a case of, yeah, I've got the power to do it, I've got this uniform, and therefore I think I can get away with it. And that's really, really worrying. Going back to your question as to why this has suddenly come to everybody's mind and come to the forefront of global action. As Cara said, yeah, it has to do with the internet. But also, if you think back, COVID-19 has actually created an environment where everybody is at home. Everybody is available to go out on a protest. Otherwise, people would have been at work, people have been on business doing their own things. And therefore, if anybody calls for a protest, yeah, you might get a handful, but you won't actually get the groundswell. So if we really want to spiritualize this, is it a case of this is the COVID and this, and maybe any other thing is actually sort of a groundswell to us all, as I said some weeks ago, pressing the reset button. We need to change our ways. And as we've discussed here, yeah, there could be legislation, maybe planes and statues are taken off and things like that. But essentially, the change has to be from here. It has to be the individual. And I think our youngest son, Tosin, was actually, I've been challenged over this for some weeks and started getting things, the social media, or why you're not putting Black Lives Matter on your masthead or whatever it is. And then there have been this calls that if you don't say something, then that means you're racist.
Mm.
And we had to sit down here, for about 4 or 5 hours one night actually discussing it, because he's saying that, look, he's educating his friends as to why Black Lives Matter. He's talking to them one-on-one, on a one-on-one basis. He is not interested in sort of putting anything on social media because he believes that it's only education that can actually change people's minds and perspectives. But on the other hand, some people think that is the overt thing that you paste on your social media feed and things like that would actually make the difference. Yeah, okay, that could just show so many people. But as Owen has said, I think it's more of we just need to sort of be a bit introspective, think about these things, and actually, at the end of the day, if you were in that situation, would you actually enjoy being treated like that? I think that's the bottom line. And I've been posting a few things on my Facebook with, I've been taking a lot of pictures of birds, but even before George Floyd came about, I've been sort of trying to put messages there from the Bible, almost like at the end of the day, it's love, isn't it? I think one of my last ones was that love thy neighbor as thyself. And really, we can't go wrong. Black, white, Asian, or whatever it is. Yeah. If you go back to that basic principle, if you don't love your neighbor as yourself, then I don't think we're doing anything right. To be honest, that's my view.
I think there's a couple of things. Going back to your question again, internet, it's the visibility of it all. I think Will Smith basically said racism hasn't got lessened.
No.
It's being filmed now. And I think someone's comment was that the only way the youth or black people can protect themselves now is by filming what the police are doing.
Yeah. And
this was caught and it was brought out in the open and it was then caught at everyone's attention. Yeah. And I think you're very right, Adi, that COVID-19 has brought about a sense where people's attention is not distracted, it's now focused. And this has come at the time when people can actually give themselves an opportunity to respond to something that is no longer just in the background or hearsay. It's actually a valid live thing that people have seen and they can respond to that. And I think that's very key, very, very key.
See with their eyes.
Yeah. You can't a picture paints 1,000 words. You can't dismiss that. It's very clear to see. That's why they were dismissed immediately, even though they fabricated some story about what was inside his body and that he potentially would have died. If you put him in the car, in 9 minutes he wouldn't have died based upon what they were saying about his illnesses and stuff. He would have still been alive and he could have testified. So there is no way that could have happened. So there's lots of things that probably come together. I've been doing a little bit of trying to get an understanding of it all. But that doesn't change my viewpoint that, we do need to look at how we move forward from this and in a joint way that, black and white or any colour have to find a way of moving this. Because we don't want to shift the attention to another demographic. We want to maintain an equal balance as Christians for going forward, really. And that's what we need to do. Share the love of Christ accordingly in the fair way, as he would have done. I think just one more thing, this other thing that Adi was saying about, that we have to have a change of heart. God is moving us. At the prayer meeting the other week, I felt very much that, we've been praying the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come. And when your kingdom come, as in when God comes onto the earth, he is light and it will expose the darkness. And that darkness will have to flee. It will be exposed in such a way that we as Christians need to stand and respond to that according to what he's asked us to do. So I think we're in a different stage now. We're in another stage of the walk with Christ. He's moving us into, or mobilizing us, I think. And this is a great opportunity to do something about it.
I guess there's one thing I would say, though. We are Christians. We are living in Northampton. A lot of these people, a lot of the people that are marching in London, for example, live in a different kind of arena, in a different circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can be quite rational, and we can lean on our faith. Those people just have anger and the hurt, and want a practical solution, a more practical, I should say, solution. So it's almost as if we're just representing one side of a black argument, for want of a better word. And there are other people out there who would probably say we're quite soft, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They would,
yeah, that'd be my family. The other parts of my family. The other parts of my family are very much more, and you can see it, and I can see that it's going to be quite an interesting debate when we do have a family debate. You know, what is right, what is wrong, and you know, we have a lot of Christians in the family, and again, the perspective is different. And some, you know, mine is this, as you've heard. Someone else would be very much more case. You know, we should be in a better position. We should be compensated. You know, what's the right argument? I don't know how it's going to work going forward, but you know, based upon my understanding of what the Bible says, that's where I'll be going. That's where my guidance will be. And you know, you can't force somebody else down that route, but you can try and educate them down that route, or let the Spirit do His thing to actually change that.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one, because one of our son's friends was actually saying the other day that so if, as we've already talked about, people start apologizing, and will the black community accept? And it's an interesting question for me, because at the end of the day, if somebody says as a first step for them to change, say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then the person that this is directed at says, "I don't really care, I'm not accepting this," then where does that leave us?
Exactly.
Where it leaves us at the same spot. And I think, unfortunately, we're, again, to be honest with you, it all goes back to the experiences. We've talked about various experiences here. We've talked about black and white churches and things like that. And seriously, it's an issue, because people have different experiences, and then people are actually drawn to different places of worship. I always say that one of the biggest problems we have as Christians is, which denomination do you attend, or you're affiliated with? And a lot of my contemporaries that probably grew up in Nigeria and came here, a lot of them attend predominantly Nigerian churches, sort of churches that have their headquarters based in Nigeria or wherever, and because there's this belief that, oh, this is how we worship and this is how we do it, and sometimes I think that is actually a carryover and a carry on of some deep-seated sentiments that we have to keep within ourselves. Again, that way we don't get racially abused, or we don't get hurt and things like that. So there's so many layers to this. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep praying about it. I think we also have to keep educating ourselves and others about it, because it's not just one size or one solution fits all. I think it's just it's almost like you just have to keep peeling back the onion, because there are just so many parts to it.
I think also there's a bit, coming back to where you mentioned, sorry, Addy, and also Pastor, you asked before about the statues. I think part of it, the sorry bit, is about the fact that it's where people are feeling they're unfavorably treated. And I think that's the same for America as well. And coming back from a slavery background, it's this thing of I'm using the word we, from slave descent. You have these statues up which are honoring these people who were our slave masters, and you're not treating us right. I'm just using that we broadly, but you're honoring these people. So you're disrespecting my life in this, my contribution by hailing these people. I think that's probably one argument.
Yeah.
Which explains the anger with the statues.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say? I was going to say something else. It's just gone.
Okay. Well, I'll chuck something else in while you think about that, Claudette. I mean, I think. Sorry, I lost you for a second there. I don't know if you realised, but hopefully it was still recording. But my Wi-Fi cut out randomly and then cut back in. I mean, one of the things that I've been reflecting on is that my history at school did not cover empire. My history at school is from what I can remember of it was from a very, was a white male perspective, you know, and I think I'm reading the biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the pastor from the Second World War in Germany at the moment. And, you know, it's fascinating to see what the church was willing to tolerate in that time, and what he wasn't willing to tolerate, you know, and but the tension of that. But, you know, I think Germany, you know, has appeared to be able to make the right reparation historically, and has, you know, your Holocaust Museum, and you know, and has dealt with their past, and you know, South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation, you know, incredible. I mean, you know, how that. I mean, I know that, you know, it's still not without its issues, and I'm not saying it's, but actually to think where it's come from. And one thing I've been reflecting on is we've never really accepted our responsibilities, and we've never taught. History has never been taught in a way that actually even addresses the fact that, you know, we as a nation have things that we definitely need to feel shame for, you know, and I think there's an arrogance to it, isn't there? You know, there's an arrogance to our Britishness that I increasingly feel uncomfortable with. But anyway, so that's just one, you know, I think that kind of feeds into all this as well, I think.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Education is really important, because when I think of my history book, I was represented by a lady topless with a short skirt, clearly supposedly an African image with a bone sort of through the nose, and that was the image in the books that represented us, whoever us were, you know. And they haven't. I think there needs to be something in the education system that say, well, actually, as a people, we were part of all of this. You know, we may have been laborers, involuntary, but we are part of what made all of this great, certainly for here, and I guess in the same sense for the USA. And there probably are laws there, but what's happening with them? What's happening with them? But education is key. That needs to be done properly.
Final question is, you know, what do you think, you know, if you're addressing you're addressing Broadmead, your brothers and sisters, your family, what do you think they need to understand, or what would you want to communicate to them out of this time?
No, I think more than anything else, it's just we need to think very, very carefully as to what we want to impart, particularly on our children. That is, we that have children. One of the things we've never done is to sort of hammer to our children that you're blacks. And that was really deliberate. When we moved to Brixworth, our children were the only, our youngest two children were the only black children in Brixworth Primary School. And we tried, don't make a fuss about that's their color and all that. make friends as much as you want, and if you want to bring them back to the house, that's fine. Because the idea was that people need to see you as you are for them to actually appreciate and know who exactly you are. Because there's so many stereotypes. Until we break those the walls of stereotyping, I don't think we can actually move forward on this. And so I think the key thing is, go back to the biblical principles, but more than anything else, you try as much as possible to don't emphasize the color of the skin. A human being is a human being, end of story.
Eddie.
Did you want to go?
I think the only message that I can think of is that, like, you can't understand something fully without opening up to different perspectives. So you can't just fully, like, say, well, this is my opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's the only opinion that is valid, because everyone else is going to have different experiences. And I've personally felt like my friends and people around me opening up about their experiences has helped me in this, like, movement to understand, like, what it's truly about. And I think that's just what everyone else should do, because it just helps a lot.
I guess two things. Black Lives Matter, I'll come back to that one, just in case I forget. I would say to our church family, if you have a question, ask it. Be bold, ask a question. If there's something you wonder about, ask the question. The worst anybody can say is, I don't wish to talk about it. But I think communication is so important now. You know, my manager at work said to me, have I ever done anything? And I said, no, you haven't. But if you feel and know that something is wrong, speak up. Don't just sit on it and go away. Speak up. You know, for justice, for whatever. Write a letter to somebody if you have to, because I wrote to President Trump myself in my anger. But anyway, but speak up. Don't sit on it, and speak to me about something. If I can clarify something for you, you know, I'll do my best. That's the first thing. And the Black Lives Matters one, I know that I've heard people say, well, all lives matter. And yes, that's true. And I don't think by Black Lives Matter, they're saying, well, our lives matter more than anybody else's. We're just saying that actually they do matter as well.
Yeah.
They are important. So I think people easily go, well, our lives matter as well. We're not saying that, but at the moment, our lives, Black people's lives, don't seem to be as important. And I think that's what Black Lives Matter is saying. We want to come on par rather than always feeling we're the underdogs or we're not good enough. So that was something I felt just to clarify from my perspective.
Great, thank you. I mean, it looks like you've got the final word.
You think? Okay. I mean, I love the way that Broadmead is always challenging us to move to the next stage in our walk with Christ. And it's just amazing that, you know, we have a progressive movement towards a better Christian discipleship, which is great. And I think, you know, the education aspect of it is good because we're taking biblical principles and we're moving us along with that. So I think part of that should be, you know, this education about how it is that Christ would deal with these things. For, you know, he would stand for the people that were oppressed. He would stand for the people that are in the right, you know, in the wrong place or the wrong, you know, people that are actually ostracized by society, the lepers that wouldn't be touched. He would stand for those. And he'd go in and he'd protect those, do the things that weren't expected to happen because he was demonstrating God's love. And I think, you know, as a church, we just need to work into that, not just our church, but generally the church needs to work into that to start recognizing that we have a bigger picture we can paint here. Because people need to get the perspective that, you know, what Christ says is important. The lives that he asks us to lead is important because he wants us to demonstrate the grace, the love, the joy, everything that comes with knowing him. So I think as a church, you know, my first thing would be to say that, okay, we take a stand as a church that we're going to follow the discipleship walk. We're going to do the things that we're supposed to do. And we're going to bleed with our brothers. We're going to stand with our brothers. We're going to support our brothers and sisters. We're going to do the things that we should be doing as equal, as we've already talked about. But we should also, as Claudette has already said, we should voice against the injustices of the world. We should do something proactive. We can't be passive and say, I'll pray about that, because that in itself is inactivity. It's a sort of get out of jail free card. We need to do something a bit more actively, just as Jesus did. He didn't just say, I'll pray about it. He did the things that were going to make the difference and challenge people. And he said things that actually got him killed. And, it says those that love their life will lose it, and those that hate their life, So we just have to work on a bigger picture, because as Adi has already said, we're being called to doing greater things now. We're not just supposed to be nominal, we're supposed to be active disciples. And I think this is a wake-up call for all of us. And this may just be the first of many different injustices that we need to address. So stepping into that is going to be quite a big thing. And perfect love casts out all fear, and Christ gives us the love that he gives to us because he wants us to love as he did. So we need to stand in that place and do what he would do, be his hands and his feet. That's what I'm feeling, that, we're in a bigger place now. We're in a stronger place where we have to demonstrate that, and we can't be passive in that anymore.
This isn't one for the church to solve, but it's a bugbear. We have this thing about the black race and the white race. And so we have these parallels that are walking. And I think what's been forgotten is actually that we are the human race of many mixtures. But we've got this black race, as if there's a competition. And I think that helps maintain the division. But I don't know who solves that.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But I guess we look forward, don't we? I just love that picture in Revelations of every tongue, every nation, everyone, together. Because, it's fascinating, isn't it? Owen was saying that his family were very much welcomed at the church. Whereas, Adi, you were talking about people wanting to stay with their own for fear of not being included. And Claudette, I think you were saying that wasn't the experience. My
experience. I was going to Sunday school before my parents started going to church. So I went to the white church, evangelical. Right. Absolutely loved it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We love the freedom of it.
Yeah. But definitely, some people have felt unwelcome, and clearly other people have felt welcome. So I think the church can be guilty in their silence. I think they can be guilty in their attitude, and we are given a mandate to stand up for justice. We are seeking to bring the kingdom of God to rule and reign and to flow like a river. And I think that that calls on us to speak up for those who are being oppressed, and to stand up and to say that we are one in Christ. And I think that's, and my prayer is that I think there are a whole host of different, I think Claudette mentioned the public nature of this. The whole thing is on camera. The defenceless nature of this public lynching. I think the fact that Cara talked about social media, I think that's a factor. I think Adi was talking about COVID-19. I think also the fact that we're in a time where people who are black, ethnic minorities, etc., are deemed to be more vulnerable to this disease. So there's a whole a lot of stuff that's playing into this. But my hope is that this is a you said a restart, Adi. I've been using this is rebooting our society. There's an opportunity to restart, and I hope hope and pray that is what we see happening, and that hearts, as you mentioned earlier, Owen, absolutely right. Yes, there are established in law and etc. that there are institutional changes, but without a heart change, I don't think that makes much of a difference. And I think that's a heart change. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I think it's going to come across really well. And I've been very moved in hearing your stories, and at the very least, it's helped me really understand it more. That's not your responsibility. That's my responsibility. I guess ultimately we're living in the result of the fall.
Yes.
And, and I guess, we're in this transition period, aren't we? Where, the kingdom is now and not yet. And I guess we want more of the not yet into this situation. And there, there has in this season been an uncovering, hasn't there? There has been an uncovering. Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, I do want to let you go. Enjoy the rest of your evening. So, and I do want to pray for you. So, Father God, I thank you. I thank you for Claudette and Addie and Cara and Owen. I thank you for the time they've given into this evening. Oh, Lord, I pray that I would now be able to put this together to capture the essence of what you are wanting to say into this situation. Lord, I thank you that you have used you've used these 4 people to do that, to speak with real clarity and conviction. They've remained positive. They've remained. They've been looking for solutions. They've remained men and women of peace, even though at times I know that they have been very angry and upset by this, quite understandably. But Lord, I thank you that you are taking them into a deeper understanding of who you are and what you're doing. And so, Lord, I pray for their families. I pray for their understanding of how they should respond. And Lord, I pray that you would help this video to develop all of us in knowing how we can respond, how we can express your love for all people, how we can express and stand up for justice, and how we can grow even further in our love for all people. That you came into the world and went to the cross for all of humanity, for the whole world. And we thank you for that. And I thank you for these people. And I pray your blessing be upon them and on their families at this time. And Lord God, I pray wider, globally, that justice would happen in the case of the death of George Floyd. I pray that the right decisions we've made about statues, and I pray, Lord, that we as a nation would face up to our past, and that there would be fundamental change in so many areas of life. But Lord, I pray, as has already been articulated, Lord, I pray for a change of heart, that you would soften our hearts, Lord. Give us your heart for all people. Amen.